met my ex-lover and started an affair again. My husband found out and destroyed everything.
I never knew that one mistake would lead to me divorcing my husband and making my husband hate me forever. I thought that the friendship I had with my husband's boss was never going to be the problem, but it later cost me a great loss because I lost my husband and also my best friend. My fellow Redditors, my name is Mary and I am 30 years old. I am also an event planner, and event planning has been my passion for so many years. The name of my husband is Gabriel, and he is 35 years old and he is an architect. Gabriel and I got married about 3 months ago, and it has been great. Gabriel and I met through a mutual friend, and it was love at first sight. Gabriel was very charming at first, and I really thought he was just doing so in order to get me, but I was very wrong. Anne is one of my best friends. I met her in college, and ever since we have been together through everything. It was Anne's birthday party in summer last year, and like every other year since college, she decided to throw her usual birthday parties. I knew she could always go all out for those parties, and I always supported her. It was like every other day I was having lunch with Anne when she brought up her party that was coming up. As usual, we discussed the details, and I looked forward to the party like always. On the day of Anne's birthday, I got ready to attend, and I dressed to impress like always. I got to the venue, and I wished my best friend a happy birthday. She asked if I should go with her to say hello to the guests, and I accepted. It was such a lovely evening. Few hours into the party, I was already feeling exhausted, and I went to meet Anne, who was across the room when I ran into someone. I quickly apologized and left. I met Anne, and I told her I was leaving, but she insisted I should still stay a little. We were speaking when a man joined us. Anne proceeded to exchange pleasantries, and I was left standing. Anne later introduced us, and I discovered it was the same guy I ran into earlier. I apologized again, and Anne told me all about him, saying he was the guy she had been telling me about. But I knew she was just trying to set us up because I didn't know anyone like that. Anne left me standing with Gabriel, a guy I didn't know at that point, and I was very mad at her, but I knew she meant well because I hadn't been in a relationship in a while. Gabriel and I got speaking, and he told me a lot, but himself, and I asked him why I never met him. Even when he was very close to my best friend, and he said that he normally sees me afar, but he didn't know if I was spoken for. I told him he could have just come up to me, but he never did until then. I told Gabriel I needed to leave because I had an event the next day. We didn't get to exchange numbers. I said my goodbyes to Anne, promising to meet up for lunch in a couple of days. The next day, I was booked for business because I had an event I was taking care of. I kept thinking about Gabriel because I had a very good evening with him. I knew some of the people at Anne's event, but his company was the best, and I later found out at that moment that I didn't get his number. I felt sad because I had thought maybe he didn't feel the same way. That's why he didn't ask for my number. I decided to just let it go and not worry over a guy who might not have any interest in me. The next day I met up with Anne and we talked about fashion like we always do, but she brought up Gabriel and I told her we were just talking at her event, that there was nothing more to it. And I also told her that it wasn't that serious, because if it were serious, he could have asked for my number, but he didn't. Anne was surprised, and she went on to talk about how I shouldn't just wait for the guy to ask what I should have just given him. Anne, between the two of us, is the most forward. She could always get any guy she wanted. She always went for whatever she wanted. Anne somehow got my phone and dialed Gabriel's number before I could say anything to her. Gabriel picked the phone and I had no choice but to talk to him. I told him I was the one, and he was kind of surprised it was me because he wasn't expecting me to call, and I told him we never got around to exchanging numbers. We spoke for a few minutes and he had me out for lunch and I accepted. I ended the call and I didn't know what to do with Anne. I felt embarrassed. I called him because I didn't want to look desperate. But like always, we laughed over it, and I told her I had lunch with him the next day. That evening, I went to see my father. It had been a while since I knew we were repairing our relationship, because for a long time, I never knew who my father was, and at some point, I was able to find him, and I didn't know how to feel because I felt like he abandoned me. But instead, I discovered that he never knew I existed. He asked for a chance to be in my life, and I gave it to him. I didn't want to punish him for what he didn't know anything about. I had dinner with my dad, and he kept trying to be everything and more for me, and I appreciated it. I went home tired from a long day, and I slept off. The next day I went to work, and I met a couple who were planning to get married, and I was in awe. They were so in love, and I felt jealous because I wanted to have someone I could share my life with in that manner, but I didn't want to think too much into it because I usually overthink things and stress myself out. I finished with the couple and it was already lunchtime. Not long after that, Gabriel came to pick me up. He took me to my favorite restaurant. I didn't know how he knew, but I was sure it was the work of Anne. She had her name written all over it. Gabriel charmed me as usual, and we had a good time. He told me about how he had lost his family and how he had never been the same. I was feeling very sad for him because I knew what it felt like to not have any family. We finished our lunch, and Gabriel dropped me off, promising to see me later in the week. It had been a month since I last heard or spoke with Gabriel. I didn't understand why he could ghost me in such a way. I thought we were doing great. I tried to reach him a couple of times in that month, and he didn't respond. I concluded that maybe he wasn't into me as I was. I also thought maybe I was too forward. Few days later, Gabriel showed up at my store and told me he had been busy with work and he was sorry. I understood because I knew how work can be. We went out a few times, and in those times we became very close. We went out on a couple of dates, and he finally asked me out and I accepted. I was finally his girlfriend. I thought he took his time though because I was expecting it for a long time. Gabriel and I dated for some months and our relationship grew into something beautiful. I met some of his friends and it was really lovely. Anne kept going on and on about how she was the one who brought us together. But I never gave her the satisfaction because I had always said she never really introduced prior to that day, and we had been attending her parties for years. I kept teasing her about it and she loved it. Gabriel proposed to me a few months later and I panicked at some point. I didn't know what to say and Gabriel gave me some time to think about it. I appreciated it because he was not trying to rush me and I was happy. I talked to Anne and she explained to me how Gabriel loved me and he could do anything for me. She reassured me and that was everything I needed. I said yes to Gabriel the very next day and he was ecstatic. We planned our wedding and it was beautiful. I never felt so much happiness. My dad had worked me down the aisle and I had never seen him so proud. After the wedding, Gabriel had asked me to move in with him, but I didn't know what to say. I had told him that we should look for a place together and make payment together, but I changed my mind because I was very busy with work after the wedding, because I had taken some weeks off. But seeing that house hunting could be another problem added to my work schedule, I decided that we move in together. We started living together and things were going smoothly. We could wake up together, eat breakfast before going to work. We had our regular dinners with friends and family, and I always felt safe around Gabriel. He was almost everything I wanted and more. He would listen to me and solve any issue I had. I was in the store finishing up a meeting with my client when Gabriel came in. He had told me his boss was having his birthday celebration the next day. I was surprised he was just telling me, but he said that it was just planned and it was a surprise party for him. I told him I didn't know his boss because he was not at the wedding and he said he was out of town for work then. I decided to go with him because I didn't want Gabriel by himself. I thought to ask Anne to get me something to wear, and like always, she delivered and I loved it. The next day, I got ready with Gabriel and we went to the party. We got to the venue and it was packed. Gabriel introduced me to some people and we talked for a bit. Things were going smoothly and I excused myself to go to the restroom. I finished up and headed back to my surprise. The birthday boy had already walked in. I couldn't see him because a lot of people had gathered around him. I went out to call Gabriel saying I had to leave because it was getting late, but he insisted I see his boss before leaving. I accepted, and not long after he came to find me. We went together to meet his boss and say happy birthday to him, but he was busy with some important people and Gabriel asked me to wait a few minutes. We waited for an hour before we were allowed inside. At the moment, I was very pissed because I had to ask myself why he kept us waiting for that long. It wasn't fair no matter who he was. Few minutes later, we were asked to go in and see him. I was already pissed, but I made up my mind to just forget about it because of Gabriel. On getting inside, I received the shock of my life. I saw Ross, my ex-boyfriend, who left and didn't say goodbye. I couldn't believe that he was my husband's boss. I told myself I wasn't going to behave like I knew him because it had been so long, and I am already married, so Gabriel introduced us, and I could see the shock on his face too. He decided to play along with us, not knowing each other, which was fine with me, because I wasn't going to put Gabriel in the position where he had to feel his wife and his boss had history. We said happy birthday to him, and we left the office, and I kept wondering about how Ross was my husband's boss and how weird it was to see him again. The next day, my husband noticed my mood and he asked me about it, but I told him it was nothing. I wasn't going to tell him I had a kind of relationship with his boss. I went to work like usual, and I decided to take my mind off things and bury myself in some work. After a while, Anne came around and we talked about Ross. She was surprised about the dynamics, but I had to tell her not to mention anything to Gabriel, because at that point, I wasn't going to pursue anything with him. But my friend Anne warned me to stay away from Ross because I was married, and he was the one who had left me alone when we were still together. I took her advice because I wasn't about to destroy the marriage I had with Gabriel. A few weeks later, I was at home preparing dinner when Gabriel got back from work. We ate, and he had brought up this story of how we needed to attend their yearly gala organized by his company. I did want to go, but when he had told me I was going to be considered with organizing it, I was very happy because that could be a huge plus to my store. I was happy until he told me he had suggested it to his boss, and I had to go see him the next day to make some preparation, and of course ask him a few questions. I didn't want to lose the opportunity because of my old history with Ross. I made up my mind to go, and I thanked Gabriel wholeheartedly because it was a huge opportunity and he made it happen. I got ready the next day because I had an appointment with Gabriel's boss, so I had to ride to the office with my husband. We got there and he kept me waiting like usual, but I remembered I was only there for my store and I knew this event could put us on the map. I entered his office and we greeted each other, and I got down to business, but he said he needed to attend a meeting and that we should start the meeting by lunchtime. I was very angry because I knew he was messing with me. I decided to tell my husband the latest development about how his boss wanted to have a private lunch with me to talk business. He didn't see anything wrong with that, and he had said I should be patient. I went back to the office and I got started with work because I knew after that lunch, I was going to be so angry. It was time for lunch and I wasn't feeling it because I was discouraged, and I knew it was just going to open old wounds. I got down to the restaurant where we were having lunch, and I saw that Ross was early for the first time since I met him. I sat down and we got to business. He had told me how he wanted the event to be, and I took every detail down. Ross kept talking about us, and I was feeling exhausted about it, and I made it clear to him he was the one who had left me. He told me he had a good reason, but honestly, I didn't want to hear it. But Ross was persistent, and he asked me to please hear him out, and I did. He had told me he was left with no other choice because he had to pick between me and his family. I know Ross loved his family a lot, but I didn't know why he had to pick. He refused to tell me, promising to say it on our next lunch together. But I had explained to him that I wasn't going to keep having lunch with him because I was married. But he told me it was a harmless lunch that my husband was aware of. A few days later, we started preparing for the event. It was a big event, and I needed more hands to help out. I employed more people, and it was moving smoothly. But I still had lunch with Ross, which I kept postponing, but I knew I had to get around to going because we were going over the last details of our arrangement. I went to lunch with Ross, and we finished everything. He apologized about what happened a few years back, and I was happy because at least it was past us now. We can concentrate on the event. The day of the event came and everything was set. I went to the event with Gabriel, and he was proud of what I had done with the place. Throughout the night, Ross kept staring at me, and I kind of found it weird, and when he came over to talk to Gabriel, his hand kept brushing mine. At some point, I felt like he was flirting with me, which was not appropriate. A few weeks later, Ross showed up at my store telling me he wanted to take me out to thank me for the event I organized, and I respectfully declined, but he insisted. I went out with him, and it was fun for us to have reconnected after a very long time. It was fun while it lasted. Ross kept sending me flowers after that day, and it was very nice. We talked on the phone for a few minutes in the day, and most days he had said he wished he had come earlier before I got married. He still loved me, and he wanted to make up for lost time. I decided to give him a chance in order for him to try. We went out for a few dinners, but I didn't see it as something that could harm my husband. But I knew I was lying to him, and I decided to stop. I discussed it with Ross about us telling Gabriel about us knowing each other, but he had said no, that it could complete things at work, and he didn't want to lose his best employee over what we had. I told him since we hadn't done anything bad, we should come out to Gabriel, but he refused. From that moment, my secret relationship with Ross grew. We kept seeing each other, and I became too comfortable. I felt like at some point my husband had suspicions about my late-night dinners, but he had thought it was just work. It was like every other day when I met up with Ross, and he had told me I should be creating enough time for us. I had to tell him I was married, and it could be very bad for either of us should my husband find out that we had been seeing each other secretly. But Ross kept asking for more time with him, which I gave in. Looking back now, I regret my decision because it had created problems for me. My husband and I started having issues all because I wasn't at home anymore. And most days I wasn't at the store either. But I had to lie to him that I was busy with different clients and they were taking my time. He believed me for some couple of weeks before Ross had gone out of town for a business trip. I wasn't happy because I found myself to be missing him. I made plans for Gabriel, and I should go out for dinner since we had been having issues for some weeks now. We reconnected and everything was okay before Ross returned. I went back to see him, and at some point we ran into Anne at a restaurant. I didn't know what to say because she had warned me to stay away from Ross, but I didn't listen to her. She pulled me aside and he told me I was making a big mistake going out with my husband's boss, but I didn't listen to her. I told her it was nothing. I went back to meet up with Ross, and I didn't know that Anne had already gone behind my back to call my husband to the restaurant. I didn't know Gabriel came in secretly and saw me and his boss together. Ross took me to his house, and we spent the night together. The next morning, I saw Ross sleeping naked beside me. I felt like I had committed a big sin because everything that Anne had said to me was true. I was going after someone who did not care about me, someone who had abandoned me. I quickly got ready and I went back home to my husband, planning to apologize to him and tell him everything that had happened. But I got home to see that Gabriel was very angry at me, and he already had the divorce papers signed. He didn't allow me to explain anything. He was very curious with me. I begged him to listen to me, but he said he could have considered forgiving me if I didn't sleep with his boss. I felt horrible because he kept guilt-tripping me, and I felt worse. Gabriel asked me to pack out of the house, and I did. I shouldn't have been deceived by Ross, who left me when I needed him, and when he discovered I was married, he came and ruined my marriage. Updates. Hello, guys. So I signed the divorce papers, and Gabriel and I are officially divorced. It was very exhausting. I was not happy because it took a great toll on me. I lost my husband due to my foolishness. I was happy in that marriage, and I knew that my husband loved me, but I went after someone who I wasn't sure of. I heard that Gabriel had resigned from work and he has started his own business. I was happy for him. And through everything that was happening, Anne had come clean to me that she was the one who sold me out to my husband. At first, I was very furious as to why she did that, but she said I was going to a place I wasn't going to come back from. I understand she was only doing that for me to see I was throwing away my marriage for someone who wasn't worth it. But looking back now, I wished it never destroyed my marriage. Ever since that night and everything that happened after, Ross hasn't called me. I tried calling him a few times, but he ghosted me. That had made what I did even worse because I lost both sides. My relationship with Anne hasn't been the same ever since. I lost all contact with Gabriel. I am now staying with my father, and he has been very supportive. I couldn't have gone through this without his support.
Good day, Redditors. I'm actually very excited to share my experience with you all today. Consequently, I know there will be several questions regarding the motive of this post, and I'm ready to answer all the questions. I'm in a very good mood because something very comical happened to me. Something that I'll like my dear Redditors to know. My ex-wife had the audacity to show up at my house yesterday. I thought she'd gotten lost or something, but no. She came intentionally. The funniest part is that the foolish woman wants me back in her life. She finally wants her husband and child back. I can assure you all that nothing like that is going to happen. I'd rather die than have that woman in my life again. After she came back here yesterday, I knew I had to hatch up a plan. I don't want her in my life or my child's life, and I will make sure I fight her till I die. But I don't know of my daughter. She might say she doesn't want her back, but we all know that children are gullible. It does not help that she was an infant and had no recollection of what transpired years ago. That's why I'm here to share my story with Reddit so you all can direct me to the right part. My motive is to make sure my daughter hates her forever, and I'm going to fight for that with everything in me. But before we do that, let me tell you all a little bit about me and my witchy ex-wife. My ex-wife, Sophia, F33, and I, Nathaniel, M35, were married for just 2 years and a half and knew each other for 2 years before we got married. We had our daughter 2 years into our marriage. We were first-time parents and knew nothing about raising a child, but we were ready to make an effort. Or so I thought. Barely 3 months after my daughter was born, my wife packed her belongings and told me she could no longer stay married to me. "I'm done, Nathaniel. This isn't working for me. This is not who I am." Those were the exact words she said to me 10 years ago. How could a married woman with an infant just wake up one day and say she was done? How is that even supposed to make sense? I tried asking her what her reasons were, and all she could come up with was the fact that she was tired of raising a baby when she felt like a baby herself. For reference sake, I'll mention this again. Sophia was 23 years old by that time, and according to her, she was just a baby. Sophia said she was overwhelmed with our marriage and having a baby only made it worse for her, so she took her bags and left the house. Fuck it. I had a rough life even before I got married to Sophia. I practically had the worst childhood ever and was a victim of domestic violence. I grew up the hard way, so I built up my walls around me and was never one to care about any emotional shit. But what Sophia did that day got an emotion out of me. Anger. That's the emotion Sophia's actions got out of me, and trust me, that's a big deal. If Sophia had just left the marriage before we had our daughter, Daniela, I'd have been fine. I wouldn't even give a fuck what she ended up doing with her life. But she chose to abandon a little child who did nothing wrong. The moment Sophia left the house that day, I swore that she was dead to me. She has been dead to me for the past 10 years, and I swear on my life that she will be dead to me forever. Nothing in this world will ever make me take that woman back in my life. I'm not that stupid, and honestly, I don't even give a fuck what happens to her. I don't care why she came back, and I honestly don't want to know. When she came back yesterday with her mother pleading and wailing like a dog, I did not even look at her twice. I asked security to take both her and her mother out of my house. If Sophia and I didn't have our daughter, there would have been no reason for this post. But we have a daughter. My daughter is just 10 years old. Daniela is still in her first year of high school, and I don't want to take any chances. Daniela was just an infant when Sophia left her. She does not remember any of it, so it'll be hard for her to stay away. Almost every single day, I remind Daniela how Sophia left her when she was just a little baby. Many people tell me I'm wrong for doing that, and it's not right, but I don't care. I did not care back then, and I don't care now. Some relatives say it's not good to ruin the relationship between the child and the mother. But as far as I am concerned, the only mother figure in my daughter's life is my girlfriend, Esther. Sophia is just a stupid mistake I made in my life, and I don't plan on repeating that mistake ever again. I want to ask you all, my dear Redditors, to give me tips on how to make my innocent high school daughter despise Sophia even more. I need to make sure there are no chances of Sophia crawling back into her life. I know that Sophia doesn't have a conscience, so why should I? To be specific, my dear Redditors, I plan on damaging their relationship beyond repair. A woman who can abandon an infant can do anything again in the future. I want to protect my daughter because I know she doesn't have a mind of her own yet. As for me, this is also important because I don't want to see Sophia near my house in this lifetime and many lifetimes to come. The only way to do that is to cut all ties with her. The only tie remaining is my daughter. I want to teach her a lesson, and that lesson is that you don't just leave and come only when it is convenient for you. Help me here, Redditors, it's urgent. Updating. Thank you to all my fellow Redditors who have been helping me out for the past 2 weeks. Yes, you all have been helping me out because your comments and ideas have gone a very long way. To be honest, I already have a ruthless plan to get Sophia out of my child's life, but for the sake of morals, I'll just let that one slide. I want to do this in a way that will only ruin Sophia's relationship with Daniela. I don't want anything to get in the way of my relationship with my daughter. We have been together for 10 years, and I don't see any reason why that should change. A lot of you advise me to take actions fast as there is a possibility of Sophia going to court. Yes, I know that's a big possibility, and that's why I practically ran to Reddit. I know I'll win the case hands down. I'm ready to spend all my money on it if it means I'll damage Sophia beyond repair, but a custody battle will only make my daughter's life complicated. I'm ready to fight dirty with Sophia as long as my daughter doesn't have to know about any of it. She's the only reason I haven't taken reflex steps yet. Every day for the past 2 weeks have made me more angry than ever. The level of hatred and disgust I feel for Sophia cannot be quantified. I hate that woman with every vein in me, and I wish her the worst every day of my life. What makes me even more angry is the fact that she had the audacity to come to my house after 10 years. Sophia disappeared for 1 decade, then came back like she is a fucking magician who did a trick and disappeared. Her stupid mother even had the audacity to follow her here. The same woman that came back one day after Sophia left just so she could finish packing what her daughter forgot. If not for the possibility of legal charges, I wanted to strangle that woman that day. But no, violence is never the answer, so I have to do this calmly. My definition of calmly is also going to be heartless because I have waited for an opportunity to show Sophia what it's like to just wake up and lose it all. Okay, let me catch up with all of you and get you on board with all that's been happening. After posting on Reddit 2 weeks ago, I decided to take my daughter out to get ice cream the next day. Of course, I had an ulterior motive behind doing that. I don't let her take ice cream more than 4 times. I'm a month and she already exhausted those chances, but I decided to take her out for ice cream, so I called Tell Her a Story. While we were at the park, I explained to her that her mother practically abandoned her when she was a child. Listen guys, I've told her that story many times, but that day, I had to make sure I left no stone unturned. Some might call it emotional blackmail, but I do not care. I have protected Daniela for 10 long years. I watched her come home from school and say kids were asking her why she did not have a mother to drop her off. It was hard for her to grow up with only nannies as the mother figures in her life. Most of my family members are countries away from us. Daniela assured me that she will never take Sophia back into her life. Honestly, I was not ready to take the word of a 10-year-old seriously, lol. My daughter is extremely innocent and kind. I'm sure all Sophia needs to do is fall on her feet, and then Daniela will take her back with open arms. I am here to make sure that never happens. My only mission here is not just to make my daughter hate Sophia. I also want to make Sophia regret everything she did 10 years ago. I want her to possibly tear up for the rest of her life. I know, that's heartless. Do I care? No. To my surprise, some days after taking Daniela to the park, I encountered Sophia at a restaurant. Thankfully, Daniela was at school and I was alone at the restaurant. Sophia had the nerve to walk up to me and tell me we needed to speak. I ignored her and ordered what I wanted to order. Sophia did not relent. She stood with me all through my order and dared to sit on the table I was seated on. Of course, she knew what she was doing. We were in a restaurant and we had people all around us. Of course, I could not start lashing out on her and I could not try to do anything to her. If not for the fact that I was a regular at that restaurant, I would have embarrassed the hell out of Sophia. Well, I did end up embarrassing her at the end of the day. Esther lived near the restaurant, so I called her and asked her to come there so we could have lunch. I know some of you might accuse me of trying to make Sophia jealous. Well, I don't know what my motive was exactly. One thing I know for sure is that I wanted to embarrass her and make her feel small. Whether she felt jealous or not is none of my business. In fact, that would be a plus for me. My girlfriend Esther is actually very possessive. I like that about her, and that day, at the restaurant, I loved her possessive side even more. I already told Esther about Sophia's return days before that day, and Esther was very pissed off. She even asked me several times if I still had any feelings for Sophia. Of course, I assured her that I didn't, but we all know how women are. Esther did not take my word for it, and to be honest, I liked that. When Esther arrived at the restaurant that day and saw Sophia sitting at my table, she practically sprinted to sit beside me. Esther did not only glare at Sophia, but she went as far as asking her if she had no shame at all. She asked Sophia why she was sitting at the table of her boyfriend when she was clearly not invited. Sophia was shocked to hear that I had a girlfriend. I find that very funny right now that I think about it. I mean, did she expect me to spend the rest of my life waiting for her to return before I moved on, or what? At first, I just sat back and watched how Sophia was struggling to defend herself, but when I had enough, I asked her to get out. She was taken aback and did not make any move to get up, but I stood up, cussed at her, then made a huge scene. When I say I made a huge scene, I mean I made sure the drama attracted security. I told then Sophia was intruding and disturbing my girlfriend and I. Esther seconded to my claims, so Sophia was escorted out of the restaurant immediately. We had caused a scene and people practically abandoned their foods to stare at us. I did not care because all I wanted to do was embarrass Sophia, and it was a very successful execution. Esther and I finished our lunch that day before leaving the restaurant. I got home late in the evening because I spent the day with Esther. It was summer break, so my mother picked Daniela up earlier that day and they went on a trip together. I was alone at home that night, but I did not expect any guest. It was almost 10 p.m. when my doorbell rang. It was raining heavily that night and I did not expect anyone to come knock at my door. When I opened the door, I found the security man standing there. When I asked him what he wanted, he told me that someone was looking for me. I did not expect anyone late in the night, so I asked him if he recognized who it was. He told that it was the same woman who came to the house some days ago. I did not need a seer to tell me he was talking about Sophia. I was so angry that she had the nerve to show up at my house, again. I told the security man to tell her I was coming outside and that she should wait for me. The security man assured me he'll deliver my message. After he left, I locked my door, took a shower, and went to bed. Whether or not Sophia waited for me all night and got drenched in the rain, I didn't really care. I wanted her to know what waiting for someone felt like. When I woke up the next morning, I felt so happy to have left her outside, even after promising her that I'd come outside to see her. It was intentional, and I'll do it again if I have the chance. I don't think anyone would truly understand the amount of disgust I feel for that woman. Her presence practically makes me angry and uneasy. I mean, how could anyone sane enough to be called a human being just wake up one morning and leave everything behind? Everything, including a 3-month-old child. Anyone who is capable of doing that is not a human being but a beast, and I am not going to be hesitant when it comes to treating her like one. When she left 10 years ago, she practically vacated the city. I did not try looking for her, but my mother tried her best to find her. I couldn't care less, mostly because I treated betrayal with hatred. I don't have the time to dwell on the past. The only part of what Sophia did that got to me was leaving Daniela behind. That was it for me. But my mother did not relent. She kept looking for Sophia all over the city. After months of searching, she found out that Sophia had left the city with her mother. Some people said she eloped with a lover. Others said she just vacated the city. I don't know what really happened because, like I said, she's been dead to me for 10 years. I spent those years taking care of my daughter instead of looking for an adult that chose to make her own decisions. So guys, let me tell you what happened 2 days after I left Sophia in the rain. She practically stormed into my house with her mother and brother. I don't know how they even got past the security man at the gate. Sophia rained curses on me and told me how heartless I was for leaving her in the rain. She got teary-eyed and practically collapsed on the floor. She cried her eyes out and said I was making things difficult for her. All I want is my family. I want my family back, Nathaniel. Stop making this hard for me. Those were the words that came out of her mouth that day. I'm making your life hard? Are you sure you are mentally stable? When you left your daughter 10 years ago, how hard do you think her life was? How hard do you think her childhood was? And you stand here to tell me your life is hard. I pray it gets harder than this. My dear Redditors, that was my reply to her stupid claims. I had to make sure she understood the gravity of every decision she made. You know the funny thing? Sophia had the audacity to play that victim game. You know what they do in all those movies, right? One parent abandons the child, then comes back years later only to say, I'm here now. I was not in her life, but I am ready to make things right. Sophia decided to say those things too. I don't know if she thought I'd get moved by her display and suddenly tell her how much I missed her. Maybe that's what she thought, but that's definitely not what I did. In fact, I enjoyed seeing her rolling on the floor like a fucking mad bitch. I enjoyed each and every moment of it. I practically had a blast, and I am not even joking. After her stupid performance, it was her brother's turn to speak J-Guns. He told me Sophia was sorry and all she wanted to do was come back to her family. He said I should be a man and forgive her for everything she did and that it was all a mistake and blah, blah, blah. My dear Redditors, do you see what I'm working with here? I'm practically working with animals. They speak like people who have been out of touch with reality for years. To be honest, I feel like they have been out of touch with reality their whole lives. That's truly the only explanation in my head that makes sense right now. Because I don't understand how a grown man would stand in front of me and ask me to be a man by forgiving his sister who packed her things and left her marriage, a marriage that produced a beautiful daughter. I had to ask him where he was for the past 10 years and why he was not man enough to ask his sister why she abandoned a little child that knew nothing about the world. He stood there like the dumb fool he was and could not even look me in the eyes. I also had to ask him why he did not come to see his niece for the past 10 years. He tried defending himself, but I got so angry that I landed a punch in his face. I could resist putting my hands on a woman, but there's nothing stopping me from laying my hands on a dumb man. Yes, Redditors, I got into a fist fight with Sophia's brother. Of course, he fought back. He'd be a fool to not fight back. We fought for minutes, and it had to be the most satisfying minute of my life. It was satisfying because it just felt good to transfer all the hate and anger I had for my ex-wife to her brother. I think that's what they call transfer of aggression, right? Well, I think it was worth it. Sophia and her mother practically screamed on top of their lungs, thinking that would be enough to stop us from fighting. Well, it wasn't. The only people that ended the fight were my security guard and one of my neighbors who heard the conflict that was going on. Sophia left with her mother and brother immediately after the fight ended. It was satisfying to watch the horror on her face before she left. I knew that was the sign she needed to know that there was no chance that we were getting back together. After they left that day, I took a long shower and had a cold glass of whiskey. All the anger I felt did not suddenly vanish, but I still felt very relieved. Though I've not seen Sophia for the past few days, I still feel like she's not going to give up yet. I know that what transpired last time is enough to let her know that I am done with her forever, but I'm not sure it's enough to make her leave Daniela alone. Daniela is still with my mother, and I honestly don't want her to come back till further notice. I miss my daughter, but I'm doing this for her own good. I do not want Sophia anywhere near Daniela, and I put plans in place to make sure Daniela and Sophia never meet. I cannot control what happens in the future, but I can control what happens now. And right now, all I want is to make Sophia's life extremely miserable. I don't care if she feels like she's a changed woman and wants to right her wrongs. That's her fucking business, and it has nothing to do with me. She can go on with her repentance alone. I don't care. I will not let Sophia crawl back into my child's life or my life. I'm already talking to a lawyer and we are getting prepared in case she decides to take legal action. I don't even want joint custody. In fact, I want a restraining order if possible. I know it's very hard to get one unless Sophia does something that will require it. I'm ready to go as far as framing her, but my lawyer has advised me not to take that route. I'm trying my best to make sure that the court grants me full custody again. Why did I say again? Well, when Sophia left 10 years ago, she sent me the divorce papers soon after. There was no fight for custody, and that's exactly what must happen now. I'll keep you guys updated on what happens in the next few months because right now I'm focused on talking to my lawyer and getting prepared for whatever Sophia thinks she can throw my way. Please, don't refrain from dropping your comments because I'll try to comment on all of them whenever I get the chance. Till next time, Reddit. Update 2. My dear Redditors, it's been 2 fucking years since I made this post. I am beyond elated to write an update after 2 years. I can't even believe that this post has been up here for 2 good years. Time really does fly, and I'm just beginning to understand that. This experience has been one fucking funny, annoying, and elevating ride, and I'm really grateful it happened. So, let's not waste any time. I saw your comments, and you all have been waiting for this update. So, if you're guessing that Sophia gave up and vanished like she did 10 years ago, you're wrong. Sophia did not take the easy route, and I'm thankful to have predicted her actions before it was too late. She stayed back in the city and made sure she tried to get on my nerves. I got another visit from Sophia 2 months later. She came to my house and asked to see her daughter. Yes, Redditors, Sophia had the nerves to come to my house again. I asked her to get out, obviously, but Sophia came prepared that day. She began to make a scene and tell me how stupid I was if I thought I could separate a mother from her own child. She accused me of trying to make Daniela hate her, and to be honest, I was glad she saw the truth. I'm happy she knows that I want my daughter to despise her. That said, Sophia caused a huge scene at my house. At first, I engaged in an exchange of words with her, which led me into cussing her out. but later I just sat on the front porch and watched her continuously. Her rants eventually attracted the neighbors who got curious. Some of them who had stayed long enough recognized her as my ex-wife, while the new neighbors did not recognize her at all. The neighbors tried to calm her down, but she was not having it. She cried all over again and told them how I was stopping her from seeing her daughter. I've never really been one to care about public opinion, so it didn't really make a difference to me. I could see that some of the gullible neighbors and human rights activists were judging me with the way they looked at me. But the neighbors that stayed long enough and knew the full story were on my side. Some of the gossipers asked me to tell my side of the story, and I just found that very ridiculous. I didn't need to table the matter in front of anybody and get validation for what I knew was right. I refused because I was not going to give her an upper edge and let people meditate. I knew that there was nothing anybody was going to say that day that would make me change my mind. If I started explaining myself, I'd be telling them that I wanted them to judge a case that was not their business. Some of the neighbors I interacted with before tried to intervene and tell the other neighbors what really happened, but I did not try to input anything. After hours of unnecessary noise, I sent everyone out of my house. When I say everyone, I mean the neighbors and Sophia herself. Nobody was left out, not even my friends were left out. It's common knowledge that people who have never really been through a situation have the tendency to try judge that situation. Most times they just end up using their emotions and what they feel is justice. I did not need justice from anybody. I did not need anyone to give me justice. If you all are wondering where Daniela was that day, she was still with my mother. I enrolled her in another school there because I did not want her to come back till I was sure Sophia was out of the city. Daniela did not like the arrangement at all because changing schools is very hard for children, but I did not leave her with a choice. My mother convinced her with some ice cream, and that settled everything. Since I still had work, I'd go visit them every weekend, then return back to the city. Daniela would wail and cry anytime I got ready to leave. To be honest, I hated myself for spending days away from her, but I had to discipline myself. So, Daniela was not home to witness the scene Sophia caused that day. 4 months later, I started getting hints from some of the people I was close to in the city that Sophia had a new boyfriend who seemed to be rich enough. They also told me that there was a possibility of her getting a lawyer since she had a new rich boyfriend. I was relaxed before because I knew Sophia couldn't afford a lawyer bit. When I was told she had a new rich boyfriend, I knew that I had to take action fast. It was, and still is common knowledge to me, that Sophia can be very convincing. She's a woman that has the ability to make you feel pity for her no matter what type of facts you have against her. That's why I did not waste time in hatching up my plan. Weeks later, I was able to get information on Sophia's new boyfriend from a friend. I got to know that he was a guy from a reputable family who came from old money. I'm sure my fellow Redditors know how significant old money is. It's the kind of wealth that has connections and stability. I knew that I had to do something fast, or else Sophia was going to get this new guy under her palms. I had more money than Sophia, but I did not have more money than her new boyfriend. There was every possibility that she was going to get him to get his family lawyer to defend her in court. Of course, guys from rich families have family lawyers who are usually very good at what they do. I was able to come up with a plan, and that plan was to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. My plan was simple, but the execution was nowhere near simple. My dear Redditors, it's always hard for good people like me, LOL, to get vengeance. I was able to get Sophia's boyfriend's, well, his name is Darius, so let's just call him that now. I was able to get Darius' usual schedule from a friend of mine. I knew he worked at a bank and would go to a particular restaurant to cool off after work. I started going to the restaurant regularly and staying there for hours till he got there. I continued that routine for weeks before we finally spoke one day. Thankfully, he did not seem to recognize me. Maybe it helped that I introduced myself in a fake French accent with a very fake name. I started talking about finances, and he seemed to like the topics I brought up. Of course, a guy who works in a bank would want to hear about finance. It was a common logic I used, and thankfully, it worked. We became friends from that day on. 1 week later, I invited him to the restaurant to have lunch with me. That same day, I invited Sophia to the restaurant to have lunch with me. I told Darius that I recently got back with my old partner and that we'd been dating for months. He was excited and told me he wanted to meet her that same day. Sophia arrived at the restaurant before Darius did, and that's because I gave them 2 different times to come. When Sophia arrived, I told her I was ready to get back with her and that I missed her. I even went as far as telling her I broke up with Esther and was ready to let Daniela see her. She was shocked at first and tried playing hard to get, but after some time, she began to give in. We spent minutes talking, and to be honest, that had to be the most wasted minutes of my life. Thankfully, I was able to sight Darius coming from afar, and that was when I leaned in and kissed Sophia. Well, I did not really kiss her because I am disgusted by that woman. I just joined our foreheads together. Yes, my dear Redditors, I had to do what I had to do to get what I wanted. Darius was shocked to see Sophia and I in that position. I introduced her as the girl I've been telling him about, and he told me that Sophia was his girlfriend. I acted surprised and blah blah blah. Long story short, he got angry and left the restaurant. Sophia was so angry that she tried to slap me on the face, but I was able to twist her hands behind her and hold her in place. She got teary-eyed and told me she regretted the day she got married to me. I told her I was surprised it took her so long to regret it because honestly, I've been regretting it for years. She called me several names, some of which I cannot really remember, but the one I remember is betrayer. I was so happy she called me a betrayer because that just made me remind her how she betrayed her own child and how she betrayed me years ago. She stormed out of the restaurant after that, and I went home. Do I feel bad about using Darius? No, I don't. He needs to thank me for saving him from a woman like Sophia. I heard he broke up with her that same day. How do I know? One of my friends is his colleague at the bank. He's the one that told me Darius was dating Sophia in the first place. Even after Sophia tried to tell him I was just her ex-husband, he did not want to get involved in the drama. He's from a reputable family, and we all know how they hate to get into shit. Sophia lost her rich boyfriend thanks to me, and I still enjoy that fact till this day. I'm happy that I was able to take something from her life. I'm happy that I gave her hope of us getting back together that day, then snatched it all from her. It's almost a replication of what she did to me many years ago. Of course, Sophia did not give up. She filed for joint custody in court, but the case watered down in the first few weeks. She was not stable enough, and she was absent for too long in my daughter's life. I thought she'd not give up, but maybe she ran out of money and decided not to go on with the case. Even though the custody fight ended and Sophia seemed to not show herself to me for months, I was not ready to have her show up again in the future. I wanted my daughter to have a stable life without a mother who appeared and disappeared anytime she had enough money to do so. After months of trying, I was able to get a job transfer out of town. I don't want to mention our new location for personal reasons, but I was able to get far away from our old town. My daughter is back to living with me, and we've spent months making up for the time we spent away from each other. Another important news, I got married to Esther. She's been a great mother to Daniela, and that's all I ever wanted. Our marriage has been great, and we're still learning to understand each other. That's what's been going on in my life, guys. Thanks for all your supportive comments and suggestions. I'm thankful to each and every one of you. Cheers.